What's up everybody, welcome back to Meathead Gaming. My name is Roland, this is the best channel that nobody watches except a few special people like yourself, and today I'm gonna talk about a game that came out a good while ago. We're gonna talk about Race Driver Grid from 2008. So, it was a late summer night in 2009, I just stopped playing Counter-Strike competitively in my local scene due to disappointment, and I needed a game other than CS to just help me unwind and to find some enjoyment in video games again. I hopped on my local tracker that I was using back then, and yes, I was pirating my games because I was quite young and you could not afford to buy games where I lived, and saw Grid. The pictures of the game were quite good looking, so I decided to give it a try. That evening I didn't sleep, and while the birds started singing in the morning, I was still having breathtaking, adrenaline-filled fun on the circuits of this game. It was glorious and I was hooked. But that was 14 years ago, can I still say the same today? Stick around and let's have a casual dive into one of the greatest racing games ever made. Race Driver Grid was launched on the 13th of May 2008, and is a game that gamers still look upon fondly, remembering all those great races that happened such a long time ago. Why was it great back then? The visuals were extremely good, like with any racing game usually. The racing games are the ones that usually push the graphical boundaries of video games forward, and this was no exception. It also ran great, and I never really had any problems running the game back then. How does it feel today, graphically? I will say, not like it's been made 14 years ago, that's for sure. Obviously, it's dwarfed by modern racing games. Now that being said, it's surprisingly smooth and enjoyable to look at. And most importantly, it complements the game really well, and it helps it deliver a very enjoyable racing experience even in the age of woke madness. And while I am aware of the fact that maybe younger gamers will think it looks outdated, I don't think there is a person that will lay its eyes upon this game and say that it has bad graphics. That's just not possible. Unless you are one of those individuals that think your farts don't smell and you are always right. The bread and butter of the game though is the gameplay, thankfully, and that will never age. The driving feels intuitive and very satisfying once you've mastered it. The way the cars react to your input might feel that the car is all over the place at first, but once you get better at the game, it feels like controlled chaos, with small increments here and there in order to keep the car on the ideal line. The way the gameplay makes you feel is just immensely immersive and satisfying. It's quite intense, and it has an adrenaline punch like very few other games ever gave me. I played the game on the hardest difficulty, and while it's extremely challenging, it's also extremely rewarding when you manage to keep it together and win a hardly fought race. Now that being said, the game is fair in all of its aspects. Yes, it is quite challenging, but also extremely forgiving. You will never feel that the AI is just cheating or unreachable, and the opponents also make mistakes that sometimes can put you into the position of winning a race or getting a podium finish just because you hung in there and you didn't give up. The fact that you know that the AI occasionally spins out makes you stick to every race and not give up, even if you are in the middle of the pack, which makes the game even more intense. So the way you can play this game is quite straightforward. You can either play quick races on different circuits, different styles of racing, of which there is plenty to satisfy even the most pretentious ones, and obviously a nice selection of cars which are nowhere near as rich as a modern Forza game, for example, is, but it still offers you plenty of variety regardless of your tastes and pleasure. On the other hand, you can play a career path where you build up your team from scratch, buy your first car, and then race and build yourself a legacy in the racing world by winning races, making sponsor money, and reinvesting it into more cars that will open up new races, new sponsors, new facilities, and also better teammates. A great feature of the game that shows a nice depth to the career is that you can hire your teammates after a while, so you can participate with 2 cars in races, hence increasing your chances of completing sponsor objectives, which in turn will bring in more cash. You can also select from a great variety of sponsors, and depending on the requests of each sponsor, you can select the ones that fit you the best and the ones that can make you more cash. Some of the mechanics in this game are just modern commodities, but in Grid, they are very well done, and that makes it work to this day. Just like a recipe for a delicious cheesecake from 30 years ago would still satisfy your sweet tooth, because some things in life are just there. They are great, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel to enjoy them. And I truly believe that Grid is one of those rare games that, at least for me, transcends time and has a lot to offer to anybody, anywhere, anytime. The drifting is also extremely well done. In general, I'm not a big drifting fan. I consider drifting to just be a waste of petrol and tires, But this game made me enjoy drifting much more than any other game has done before. It's the best slip and sliding that I've ever had, well, with one obvious exception. The way the campaign is set up is that after you finish one of the tiers of the 3 categories, Japan, US or Europe, you have a duel which you can refuse if you want, but you shouldn't. It puts you in a one-on-one race against the game's villainous team, if you can say that, Raven West. These guys are the top of the food chain and in my case really pushed me and made me want to become number 1 and push them off the top spot, which is great. I gotta say, this game is one of the few ones that really suits and brings out the best of my competitive nature, and I will forever love it and appreciate it for that. Now that being said, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There is no qualification system in place, so your grid position is random. But it's not that bad, as most of the events consist of multiple races, usually 3, so you have a little bit of a leeway when it comes to winning events. You don't always have to win or even finish a race on the podium to win an event. Also easily, the most outdated portion of this game is the sound. The cars don't sound very different whether you drive a muscle car or a Japanese tuner, which is a little bit disappointing, but hey, back then that was it, so it's not a big problem for me. It is weird though to go into the tunnel and to hear the same engine sound as when you were out in the open air. Now if you can look past these two things, well, you will have a blast and will enjoy your time with this game even 1.5 decades since its launch, which is an amazing accomplishment that not many games can say. Oh, and I almost forget, believe it or not, this is the game that introduced the flashback mechanic into racing games. There was no such thing in racing games before this, so Codemaster really managed to deliver a game-changing package with this one. What an achievement. No wonder most of the sequel games didn't live up to the might of the first game in this franchise. I guess I've already answered the question about the game still being relevant, and I won't steal you of your precious time anymore, but I have to give you a little bit of a bad news. It's hard to get your hands on this game today. The game was removed from Steam due to copyright issues, and the only way to buy it is to get a key from third-party websites. Most of the times I avoid these websites, but if that's the only way to play this game, then I would recommend you to do that. I would just give you a friendly advice as to using PayPal to pay for the game instead of giving them your credit card information. That's about it for this one today, guys. I hope you found it useful or enjoyable or both. Stick around, I'll do more videos such as this and much more. So feel free to subscribe to my channel and stick around. Until next time, as always, stay safe, stay clean, and always stay strong.